A very warm welcome to all my friends from Chess Council of India on this webinar on ARDS. 2020 is definitely an year to remember. What we have seen in this year: wars, famine, cyclones, people dying of lightning, COVID. Yes, this is an year we are definitely going to remember throughout our lives, and an year we are going to talk to our grandchildren about, that we lived through the COVID era. After the advent of ARDS network and Berlin classification, our understanding of ARDS had improved by certain leaps and bounds. We were dealing with the patients better. But was that enough? No, I don't think so. The COVID situation has actually thrown us in a topsy-turvy situation right now. People are running helter and skelter of what to do with the ARDS situation in the COVID patients. To understand this situation better and to deal with this situation better, we have got two excellent speakers with us today. Professor Anand Agarwal sir from Sonepat, Haryana is going to talk about proning in ventilation and the benefits of proning in ventilated patients. There are numerous studies that have shown over time that proning and increased duration of proning every day actually saves lives in a ARDS kind of a situation. Then again, we have heard Donald Trump to talk about ventilators throughout his speeches as he is going for the next presidential election. Yes, Dr. Zakir Hussain sir, who is a consultant of critical care in Hyderabad Apollo Hospital, is going to talk about mechanical ventilation strategies and share his experience in ARDS patients. We are going for a great session ahead. I hope to join you in the question and answers. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Anand Agarwal, working as a technician head in the Department of Respiratory Medicine, BPS GMC, Sonipat. Today, I will discuss about the tone positioning in the ARDS. Actually, we are talking about the ARDS. It's a very well-known disease that is called Adult Respiratory Distress Syndrome. It was first described in Vietnam War in 1960 as a new distinctive clinical entity of hypoxic respiratory failure affecting both the lungs. Recently, a large observational study has reported an ARDS prevalence of 10.4% of all ICU admissions and around 23.4% of all subjects receiving mechanical ventilation. As per Berlin definition, if we talk about the ARDS, it's a diffuse inflammatory lung injury leading to increased pulmonary vascular permeability, increased lung weight, and loss of aerated lung tissue. Hypoxemia and bilateral radiographic opacities are also associated with increased venous admixture, increased physiological test space, and decreased lung compliance. If we talk about the features of the ARDS, then we found that the onset is always acute. The patients live history less than 7 days. Besides this, there are diffuse bilateral infiltrates on radiological picture. We must exclude first to make the diagnosis of ARDS that there shouldn't be any left atrial hypertension. So the pulmonary artery weight pressure should be less than 18 mm. Absent clinical pictures of left atrial hypertension. PO2 FiO2 may also give the idea about the ARDS. It's less than 300 and lung injury is less than 200 and ARDS. Although it has been further divided in a mild, moderate, and severe ARDS on basis of PO2 and FiO2 between 200 to 300 mm of Hg, then it is called mild ARDS. Then it is between 100 to 200, then it is called moderate, and if it is less than 100, then it is called severe ARDS. There are a lot of causes which may cause the ARDS, that is direct injury and indirect injury. Major cause of the direct injuries are pneumonia, aspiration, drowning, or maybe embolism, and some toxic gases may inflame the lung parenchyma and may cause the ARDS. Although there are few indirect injuries that because like serious absence, massive transfusion, pancreatitis, the alcoholism, and sometimes it may be due to anaphylaxis. So if we talk about the pathogenesis, which is very essential when we talk about the ARDS, once we know about the pathogenesis of it, we go in detail about the cloning of this. So actually what happened in the ARDS is the physical chemical injury when the chemicals or the bacteria or the viruses go inside the lung and harm the parenchyma. So there is activation of the inflammatory cascade which generated, which may cause actually the recruitment of the cellular infiltrate in the interstitium. Along with that, there are edematous fluid which may collect it in the alveoli that may be responsible for the atelectasis. Small vessels thrombosis may also be there due to some initiation of this inflammatory cascade. Besides this, it may lead to diffuse abnormality in the VT mismatch as well as reduced thoracic compliance, filling of the alveoli, and there is a vasoconstriction also. Increased dead space may happen due to small vessels thrombosis, so there is a vascular changes, which may lead to hypoxia and respiratory failure. That is major factors, major features of ARDS. So there are triplet uh, in the respiratory failure in the ARDS. The one is atelectasis, another thing which is important, the dead space, increased dead space, and third one is hypoxia. So we talk about the pathological process of ARDS. There are four stages: phase of insult, early progressive phase, late progressive phase, and resolution. In the early progressive phase, there is the exudative phase where all inflammatory mediators like TNF, interleukins, conjugate that play a crucial role, and the inflammations will take place in the neutrophils as well as other inflammatory cells may be acclimated inside alveoli as well as in the interstitium. And in the second phase, that is a formation of hyaline membrane at stratification and graphitization stages. And the third one is the fibroproliferative stage, which the fibrosis will takes us. And the last one is the improvement of the hypoxemia, and the resolution phase when all inflammatory mediators get settled down as well as they get reabsorbed in the circulation. So alleviation of symptoms as well as pathology of the lung will take place in this system. Although there are some irreversible changes which occur in the proliferative remain throughout the life that may lead to interstitial lung disease. The important question which raised, how to make the diagnosis. Already the history part is very important. Let's take the proper history. Any insult, any gas, any septicemia or aspiration history, alcoholism history. So after that, we go for the left ventricular changes to exclude any cardiac ailments. So very crucial that both the disease have the similar features. So first, it is essential to exclude any cardiac ailments. Tachypnea is very important feature, more than 20 per minute, or chest radiograph, very helpful. And if diffuse pulmonary infiltrates bilaterally, which may be present in X-ray or in CT, HRCT, that gives the idea about the ARDS process in that regard. So there are infiltrates which may be present, so we may go for the AVG, and AVG gives the idea of the oxygen saturation of the blood, that is PaO2, that is less than 50 mm of Hg, at FiO2 more than 0.6, that is most likely to be ARDS. Now, how to clinically evaluate the ARDS? So go for the chest X-ray to monitor. HRCT is very helpful to make the diagnosis of it. Evaluation of gas exchange is essential when we go for the ABG. There may be a respiratory process, hyperventilation that should be excluded. Hypoxemia, maybe there PO2 less than 50 mm of Hg, but PCO2 level generally seen in ARDS, that is 45, maybe 25 or 30. Hemodynamic monitoring is also very essential. Pulmonary edema, high cardiac output, low pulmonary artery occlusion must be taken care. Measurement of the lung is the step to clinically evaluate the ARDS. Now, important point: how to treat. Four major part of the treatment. One is ventilation, another is fluid management, steroids, the last one. The other supportive management, antibiotics and related underlying cause may be treated at the end. So important thing, that is ventilation, in which we opt the lung protective ventilation. Just discussed under the researchers that what kind of mode and different settings which can be used to protect the lungs, which four parameters are very important, like tidal volume, P positive and expiratory pressure, and position neuromuscular blocking agents. Now, in today's presentation, we will discuss about the positioning, which is very essential and life-saving in terms of patients' morbidity and mortality. So the positioning, supine versus prone, is very important point of discussion today's talk. First, we must know about how positioning affects the lung mechanics, and we should understand how it acts. In ARDS, the dependent lungs units are susceptible to collapse due to surrounding pleural pressure, as well as surfactant deficiency. The rate of the heart and abdominal pressure in the spine position further promote collapse of these dorsal lung units. Around 50% of the lung, which lies below the heart, and a person who lying supine. So that will be a major chunk of the lung during the supine position. How it could be solved? Row position has been used since the 1970 as a rescue therapy to treat severe hypoxemia in patients with acute respiratory distress syndrome. However, we talk about the BP, how it can be useful in the ARDS. If we look at this picture, here you can see there is a pleural transpleural pressure, which is -6 in the spine. And the lower, the dorsal side, it is -1. But when the patient goes in a pronate position, so there is a pressure, pleural pressure that gets drastically reduced over the dorsal surface. So that is -6. So there is a recruitment of the alveoli as well as ventilation that get also changed due to this mechanics. So we reduce the pleural pressure gradient from non-dependent to dependent region, which allows aeration. When the patient is placed in the prone position, the lung has greater homogeneity and the stress and strain forces are decreased. The lung protective effect of the prone ventilation appears to be highly relevant in the patient with a severe hypoxemia. Severely hypoxemic patients, the lung protective strategy of the loading the delivery tidal volumes provide an additive benefit when combined with the prone position. So look at this picture. So actually, lung acts like a spring and have the modifiable organ due to the effect of the gravity. That is called slinky effect. When the patient is in a supine position, there is a compression of this lung portion behind the heart or below the heart. And when the person or the patient who comes in a prone position, there is a radification of that collapsed area. So the alveoli, size of the alveoli get also increased when the patient lying in a prone position. So the redistribution of lung density with the recruitment of dorsal cases is the major impact on the lung mechanics when the patient lying in a prone position, which increase the end expiratory lung volume, increase the chest elastance, and reduce reduction of the alveolar circuit. There are various studies which are supporting this phenomenon, as Angelopoulos have demonstrated that there are lung volumes when the heat has been applied in the prone position, lung volume get drastically improved during the end exhalation, that is approximately 30%, with a reduction in the elastomer. Similarly, Cornijo et al. Evaluated the response to prone position combined with a high peak, that is 15 centimeters of H2O in 24 patients. So the ADS found that using this strategy improved pulmonary rate. So now we discuss about the benefit of the polling, that is very important. Redistribution of the blood and ventilation to at least affected area of the lung. Shifting of mediastinal anteriorly assists recruitment of adjacent area. This is a major factor. So reduced lung, it also reduced lung injury, reduced lung compression by the abdominal ventilation. There are different major trials which has been conducted in different parts of the quad since 2001 to 2013, where we found that the proning position is effective. Out of them, the one trial which recently has been conducted by the Gurin found that there are major changes, major benefits of the prone positions, which reduces the mortality drastically, that is 16%, in compared to 32.8% in the supine position. Other studies do not gives the more positive results compared to Korean. So there are two major factors which I would like to discuss in the Korean's study, as they have used the low tidal volume, that is 6.1, as well as the proning position should be kept more than 12 hours, that is around average 17 hours. Besides this, we talk about the number of cases, so it is very high, that is 466. So we get the idea how this study shows the positive results. So the APRONET study by the Gurian et al. Also observed that the patients in the prone position for an average of 17 plus hours shows promising results in terms of the back. So this graph clearly shows, as in the PROSIVA trial that is conducted in 2013 by the Gurian, it shows the mortality has drastically get reduced in the prone group in compared to the supine group. So that is 16% in the prone group and it is 32.8% in supine group. That is statistically significant also. So the key points which make the difference from other studies from the PROSIVA trials are as patients with the severe ARDS were selected in that trial. Major patients were included after 12 to 24-hour period during which the ARDS criteria were confirmed. So all the cases were confirmed ARDS cases. No one suspect has been included in the study. Besides this, long prone position sessions has been used. Prone positioning was applied to 72.3% of the time prescribed. So it is approximately 16 to 17 hours in a day that prone position should be given. And the tidal volume was kept low than in the previous trial, and the plateau pressure was also kept low, 30 centimeters of water. So these are the cardinal points which differentiate it from the other trials which has been conducted in the previous years. So this PROSIVA trials gives the positive and promising results and endorse the prone conditions which are ARDS. That is very important. Along with that, if we look at the meta-analysis which has been conducted time to time, we found that the major meta-analysis which has been conducted by the Tonelli et al. By including 159 studies, including more than 20,000 of the patients, they found that low tidal volume as well as low position in the severe ARDS is the promising results. So this is a very major thing. Besides this, there are different questions has been raised by the doctors, by the treating physicians and intensivists, that control position reduces the hemodialysis. The answer is this. The prone position can reduce the lung injuries, that is ventilator induced lung injury. And it is leads to that lead to be due to the generation of mediators, inflammatory cytokines that enter into the circulation, they cause the pyotrope. Similarly, as The barotrauma is another term which is used. Biotrauma due to the inflammatory mediators which get reduced as placebo trials also demonstrate the same that inflammatory mediators get reduced and systemic inflammation get also reduced in cases if the patients kept in a poor position and put on mechanical ventilator. Besides this, there are another chemical that can be increased during when the patient has been put on a mechanical ventilator, that is a mitogen activated protein kinase. And the one study which has been conducted by Park et al. They found that mitogen activation protein kinase phosphatase 1 get increased, that is that reduce the concentration of this enzyme in the blood. So it is helpful. The core position is helpful to reduce the MAPK chemical or the enzyme in the blood, which is responsible for the blood leakage. So the other important advantage of the coning, like ventilator-associated pneumonia, is another life-threatening complications of the mechanical vent that may be mitigated by the cone positioning. The drainage of posterior dependent lung units also improve the cone position, which makes the life. Authors observe that PP improves adherence. Pulmonary hygiene is an important factor in mitigation of the VAP, and studies have shown a reduced risk of VAP related with the PP. Placebo trials showed more ventilator-free days in prone patients, which also further reduce the risk of the VAP and is another likely contributor to poor mortality. Another questions which may be raised by few researchers, like prone position may cause hemodynamic instability. It may be myth or fact. We found that it is a myth. Gurian et al. Found that the second most common reason not to use PP in ARDS was concerned regarding hemodynamic instability. Himself, Gurian found in the Percival study showed no significant difference in the rate of hypotension in patients who were coned compared to those who were not coned. Recently, Zosviak et al. Measured hemodynamics in a prone ARDS patients by a pulmonary artery catheter. It found that prone position 19 patients evaluated actually provided beneficial hemodynamic changes such as increased right and left cardiac preload and mean arterial pressure, decreased pulmonary vascular resistance. Besides this, Millard, Barron et al. Also found that ARDS patients with both pulmonary had significant improvement in mean right enlargement. Matrovic et al. Used hepatic vein catheter to measure hepatospastic flow, hepatospastic oxygen delivery, and oxygen consumption and liver lactate uptake in patients with ARDS in the prone and supine position. So worth noting that the patients they evaluate were hemodynamically stable prior to coning, but they had systemic hemodynamics and hepatosplenic perfusions were unaffected in the prone position compared to supine. Renal hemodynamics have also been evaluated, and renal blood flow, glomerular filtration rate, and urine output have all been found to be unaffected position. This is very crucial observation by the Matron at all. Another important technique which can save the patients having the ARDS, like ECMO. So there are questions, many a time questions raised why we should front off the ECMO over the PP. So, by the studies we have compared it, the extracorporeal membrane oxygenation is a very costly therapy. And if we talk about the ECMO, there are various complications, systems are required. And complications are always there with the ECMO. So the PP is a very good strategy, and it is also very cost effective. Although this strategy have few complications, like it may even cause the pneumonias, pneumothorax may be there, a risk of pressure source, endotracheal dislocation. Along with that, there are some constraints which are associated with the prone position, like in the prone position, which is unnatural positions. So it is very difficult to move the patients many a times on the bed. There is a risk of dislodgement of the endotracheal tube and tracheostomy tube, as well as intravascular lines, body cavity drains, feeding tube also will be dislodged. ECG leads repeatedly repositioned on the back when we put the patient in a supine prone position. So it also needs expertise. So that suctioning can present a challenge in the prone position. Less experienced centers may have great difficulty in the managing life-threat complications. Uh, the protocol and nursing care guidelines may mitigate this. So, although there are few absolute and relative contraindications for the prone position. So, if the patients have increased intracranial tension and unstable vertebral fracture, we should not put the patient in prone position. Besides this, there are few related common factors in which we should not put the patient in prone position. These intraocular patients have increased intraocular pressure, deep vein thrombosis, continuous the patient on continuous dialysis, or the pregnant woman. Osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis are related contraindications. Along with that, if the weight of the patient is very high, if it is more than 135 kg, we should not try prone positioning method to for the ARDS patients. So my take home message to all of you is that it is a low cost therapeutic strategy, and the finding by Gideon et al. In the APRONET trial, SEVA trial, laser trials which has been conducted previously, shows that side effects are minimal and decreasing with the experience. We believe prone positioning is underutilized and should be considered. All patients with a severe ARDS as an adjunctive therapy to lung and ventilation. Thank you very much. If you have any query in this regard, you may ask. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Zakir Hussain, pulmonologist and critical care specialist. Thank you, CCI, for giving me this opportunity. Today, we are going to discuss about ventilator management of ARDS. ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. From last 30 years, in spite of so much of research, still the mortality and morbidity of the disease is very high, even in good ICU centers also. So recently, the Berlin definition, they have defined ARDS as mild, moderate, severe with base of PF ratio, and also added this time P of more than or equal to 5. And they have given the timings of insult also within a week of clinical symptoms, and there should be bilateral pulmonary infiltrates which are not explained by effusions or any collapse. And it should not be a cardiogenic pulmonary edema also. And in 1986, the Gattinoni, the famous pioneer in critical care, Gattinoni and his colleagues have defined this CT scan of a ARDS patient as a heterogeneity of the lungs which contains normal, good aerated lungs, and also there are some with partially aerated lungs and unaerated lungs. If you start ventilating these patients targeting this unaerated and partially aerated lungs, you will be ending up with damaging the normal, good aerated lungs, which are known as a baby lung. That's why the concept of lung protective ventilation has come after this. Always remember, you are intubating the patient and for buying the time till the disease, till the pneumonia resolves. So during this time on ventilator, please don't harm the patient. Don't cause new injury to the patient. Don't give new complications. So always select the ventilator and always do least harm to the patient. And there will be ventilator-induced lung injury, which is caused by valve trauma, barotrauma, atrophy trauma, and biotrauma. In valve trauma, if you ventilate these patients with conventional tidal volumes like 8 to 10 ml per ideal body weight, then you will be ending up with over distension of these alveoli and causing valve trauma. And if you are allowing these people to go for a high plateaus, more than 35 above, then you will be ending up with barotrauma to these people. And by not using optimal PEEP in these patients, you will be repeated recruitment and collapsing of these alveoli, causing atelectotrauma also. And by releasing inflammatory mediators because of valve trauma, barotrauma, atelectotrauma, which will increase the inflammatory mediators like cytokines, IL-6, IL-1, and TNF alpha, which will further cause multi-organ dysfunction syndrome and which will destroy the lung tissue also, which will further worsen clinical condition of the patient. and by aiming the patient with high saturation of 98 to 100%, by giving high FiO2s, you will be causing oxygen toxicity also. So always remember, target saturations around 94 is the maximum for this patient with minimal FiO2. So by ventilating these people with valvulotrauma, barotrauma, attributed trauma, you are causing biotrauma, and which will further worsen not only the lung injury but also will cause multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. The patient with ARDS, he won't die per se of hypoxia. He will be dying with multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So be careful in avoiding, try to avoid biotrauma to these people. Now let's discuss about the ventilatory strategies of ARDS. There will be invasive and non-invasive. Non-invasive ventilator strategies are always advisable in initial stages, like mild ARDS. There are so many studies go on non-invasive ventilation, but all are native trials only. The one famous study in 2010 by Ritesh Agarwal sir, they have shown role of NIV in ARDS. They have shown that 50% of NIV failure rates were seen in patients with ARDS. And so we have to be very careful in using NIV in patients with ARDS. And in 2013, Thiele and his colleagues have come up with the NIVs with intubation rates and failure rates and risk factors and mortality. They have shown that in mild ARDS, there were 31% chances of having intubation compared to moderate ARDS, where is double the chance of intubation. In severe ARDS, there's almost triple the chances of intubation here. So NIV we should be using carefully only in mild ARDS patients only. In moderate to severe ARDS, the mortality is high and also high chance of failure of NIV. And the survival rate also very poor in moderate to severe ARDS patients if you use NIV. So be very cautious in using NIV in these people. Always we should have low threshold for intubation for patients on NIV. And depends on the interface also. They have done some studies using NIV with face mask or helmet mask. With helmet mask, there is a patient tolerance is very good with that, and patient compliance is also very good. And they have shown that in the study, the need for intubation is only 18% compared to 62% with the full face mask. So NIV with helmet mask have high rate of ventilator free days and short ICU stay, and less mortality also in the 90 days have shown with less adverse effects. So ideally it's advisable to go with a full face helmet mask compared to NIV mask. Oronasal NIV mask, or what we call it a full face mask. Okay. And in ARDS patients, there are some indications for using NIV also, like in immunocompromised patients, especially hematogenous malignancies or other solid organ malignancies. These people are very immunocompromised. If you intubate these people, the high chance of having ventilator associated pneumonia and them landing into sepsis and septic shock and mortality is very high. So in these people with immunocompromise, always give a trial of NIV even in mild moderate cases also. So, but always have a backup of intubation, low threshold for intubation if any deterioration in this clinical condition like hemodynamic instability or low GCS. You have to intubate those people also. And in terminal patients like malignancies patients, when patients opt for do not intubate status, there's no point in intubating those people. So we have to give a try of NIV. And if in your ICU, if you see there are high chance of VAP rates in your with multi-drug resistant bugs like Acinetobacter or Klebsiella, then it's preferably better to go with NIV in mild to moderate ARDS only. Don't try with severe ARDS. Only mild to moderate, you can still give a try of NIV, so that somebody should watch carefully these people. Any deterioration, immediate intubation should be there. And in some more studies, they have done that indirect causes of ARDS like sepsis, like pancreatitis, they have shown good results with NIV compared to pulmonary causes of ARDS like pneumonia, aspiration, drowning. In these patients, direct causes of ARDS people, they won't have good results with NIV. Whereas non-pulmonary causes like sepsis, pancreatitis, the results are good even in mild to moderate cases of ARDS. Now in this COVID season, we have tried so many patients with NIV. We have seen very good results, but make sure somebody watches them carefully with their hypoxic irritability. Sometimes they pull the tubings also. So somebody should be watching these people with on NIV. So we have seen very good results in our setup. Patients with moderate ERDS also responding very good with NIV. And as a weaning mode also, we can go ahead with NIV. And the contraindications are same like all patients. Any patient with low GCS, any patient with hemodynamic instability, we should not use NIV for these people, even in mild ERDS also. Patients with copious secretions, or patients with recurrent vomitings and intestinal obstruction, these people should avoid using NIV. High chance of aspirations or more. Or in patients who are having inability to fix interface like facial trauma or facial burns, these people should avoid NIV. And even in 2019, ISCCM has come with the guidelines of non-invasive ventilation. They have given grade 1 recommendation for mild ARDS, especially in immunocompromised patients, to go with NIV. Let's come to invasive mode of ventilation. In invasive mode, there will be always dilemma whether to keep him on volume control or pressure control. There are so many studies, especially in Esteban and other colleagues. They have done studies on patients. They have done that volume control and pressure control. There is no benefit, especially in mortality and especially in improving the PaO2 by FiO2 ratio or P plateaus and all those things. They haven't shown any significant benefit by using either volume control or either pressure control. So both are same. Depends on your ICU protocol. Depend on those things, you can take a decision which mode to ventilate the patient. There are some Cochrane studies also, but there is no significant evidence to show pressure control over volume control. So both are same efficacy. Coming to the tidal volumes, which is very important. This is in 2000, there's a ARMA trial, the landmark trial by ARDS network protocol. They have done multi-center randomized control study of 860 odd patients. Among them, they ventilated 6 ml per kg ideal body weight and allowing plateaus only less than 30. And other group, they have ventilated with higher tidal volumes of 12 ml per kg ideal body weight, and they allowed plateaus, P plateaus around 50. And they have definitely seen significant mortality benefit in lower tidal volume group of around 30% compared to 40% in high tidal volume group. And they have shown ventilator free days and organ failure free days also in lower tidal volume group. Next, come to the important point of on ARDS, the role of high PEEP is always there. The mantra is low tidal volumes and high PEEP for ARDS. There are so many studies which have shown alveoli, low, express. These studies have shown that by using traditional PEEP around 8 to very high PEEP of around 16, 18, 20, they have shown barotrauma chances are high with a very extremely high PEEP, but the PF ratios, the compliance and ventilator free days was more or less same, but there is no mortality benefit by using high PEEP. So ideal PEEP will be around 12 to 14 for our Indian patients with ARDS, with less mortality, less complications, less barotrauma. So in ARDS, always remember to go with low tidal volume around 6 ml per kg ideal body weight with high PEEP around 10 to 14 PEEP. Depends on the clinical condition. There are some ARDS network protocol tables also, PEEP FiO2 tables. They have done lower PEEP with high FiO2 and higher PEEP with lower FiO2. There are so many head-on trials also, but there is no mortality benefit over each other. So both are same only. Depends on your ICU protocol. You can go with a higher FiO2 or lower FiO2s with higher PEEP or lower PEEP. Okay. Then comes the recruitment maneuvers. Recruitment is the application we use by using high PEEP to recruit the non-functional alveoli, which are not taking part in gas exchange, especially in ARDS patients. By giving high PEEP, we are making those alveoli to functional. And commonly done in ARDS, severe ARDS with PF ratio of less than 150 or 100. And in some ICUs, whenever there is a desaturation in between while transporting the patient or while removing the circuit or changing the circuits or while doing suctioning. Most of the centers they do closed suction only, but in some centers they do open suction. Those places, if patient desaturates more, then we give the recruitment trial. And this works only in early ARDS, especially in exudative stage only. In fibroproliferative stage, it has no role. And recruitment maneuvers, before doing recruitment, always make sure your blood pressures are stable, and if patient is hypovolemic, give some volume also. And always check before only there is a pneumo or pneumomediastinum, pneumothorax or pneumomediastinum, because high chance of landing in tension pneumothorax if already pre-existing pneumothorax is there. And you should paralyze the patient before doing the recruitment maneuver. And there are three different styles of doing the recruitment. One sustained and another is incremental. Most of the centers they use incremental PEEP only, increasing PEEP to 3 centimeter Hg every 30 seconds. Gradually they increase the PEEP, and after the plateau, then they will come back to the normal PEEP. So these things have shown much good results. There are so many Cochrane reviews which have shown that recruitment maneuvers have mortality benefits. You can see in the forest graph also, all are favoring interventions. But in 2017, this landmark trial as ART trial, our recruitment for ARDS trial has come, which has shown that by doing the recruitment and using high titrated PEEP has increased 28-day all-cause mortality in the patients. So we have to be very careful in recruiting unnecessarily. Don't target higher saturations. Permissive hypoxia, permissive hypercapnia is allowed in ARDS. Target PO2s saturation around 88 to 94 only. Don't aim for higher numbers. Unnecessary will be causing barotrauma, pneumothorax, and unnecessary will be contributing to mortality of the patients by going for unnecessary recruitment. Next comes the proning, which is exclusively dealt by our professor, Dr. Agarwal sir. So there is a landmark study with ProSeva, which has improved success rate in many ARDS patients in our ICUs. And with this, they have enrolled 466 ARDS patients with severe ARDS. They have shown 28-day mortality benefits and also 90-day mortality benefits also. So proning for refractory ARDS patients in the early proning within second day of PF ratio less than 150 has shown lot of mortality benefit and good success rate also. And one more paper from Gattinoni, he has also shown there is a 10% mortality reduction in mortality in patients with proning in severe ARDS only. Let's discuss about high flow nasal cannula. This Florali trial which have come recently has shown that there is a good benefit with high flow nasal cannula, and they have shown it's non-inferior to non-invasive ventilation like BiPAP and high concentration mask in reducing the subsequent need for intubations also. And one good thing they have shown that there is a subjectively improvement in dyspnea in the patients, and also there is a good respiratory comfort. They have so much of comfort compared to other interfaces like non-invasive face mask and BiPAP machines and all those things. So high flow nasal cannula is well tolerable in patients with ARDS. We have shown good results with HFNC in patients in COVID ARDS also. Early starting of HFNC, we have shown good results in mild to moderate ARDS. In moderate, most of our patients, they require intubation, but otherwise mild to moderate, we have seen good results with high flow nasal cannulas. This is the interface, which is very comfortable to the patient compared to the NIV face mask, which are claustrophobic and rash has the painful thing and all those things. And this is the instrument of HFNC. Let's discuss about Walden method of high flow, high frequency oscillating ventilator, HFOV, which is commonly used in pediatric patients. There's a two landmark trial, which Oscillate trial and OSCAR trial. Both have shown there is no mortality benefit. On the contrary, Oscillate trial was terminated early because of increased hospital mortality in HFOV arm compared to the control group. whereas Oscar trial has same 41% mortality and 41 in the control also, but that doesn't have any superiority compared to control group. So there is no role of HFOV in adult ARDS patients. It may increase mortality in hospital, mortality to the patients. So better to not to use HFOV. And paralyzing agents, there was a landmark study, Acurasis, which they have conducted with cisatracurium in 340 odd ARDS patients with severe ARDS, and they have shown that by using cisatracurium in initial early 48 hours, 31% was the mortality compared to 40% in the control group. So it has reduced the ventilator asynchrony, thus improving oxygenation, and also good results earlier if you use early neuromuscular blockade in ARDS patients, in severe ARDS patients. And whereas in 2019, there's a native trial of ROSE trial which has shown that by using continuous infusion of cisatracurium, it didn't improve any 90-day mortality, and they preferred light sedation compared to the heavy sedation and heavy paralyzing agent, which was shown in Acurasis. Whereas in Acurasis, they have prone almost 60% of those patients and prone, and they have used neuromuscular blockade. Whereas here, hardly 20% of the patients were prone here. That's why they have shown no improvement in mortality compared to the control group in ROSE trial. So other strategies like inverse ratio ventilation, there is no role, and nitric oxide vasodilator inhalation in ventilator patients also not significant mortality benefit. But by giving conservative fluid management as per the FACT trial in patients on ARDS, which will decrease extravascular lung water and does have some mortality benefits also. And so we have to be using judiciously fluids in ARDS patients on ventilator. And beta agonist, inhaled beta agonist as per the ALTA trial doesn't show any mortality benefits, whereas the ECMO, which was very fashionable 2 years back for ARDS patients refractory to all measures, as per the CSER trial they have shown good results, but as per the recent 2019 Eulia trial, they have shown that there is a lot of complications like bleeding and other mortalities, also no benefit in Eulia trial compared to CSER trial, which was done long back. So you have in severe refractory ARDS not responding to any other measures, lung protective ventilation, proning and other steroids and other things, then only give a trial of ECMO. Just to in well experienced centers, ECMO centers only. Okay. So to summarize, always after, as soon as you intubate the patient, always try to measure predicted body weight, usually calculated by in males of 5 feet, by default take 50 kgs. Any patient above 5 feet, you have to add for every inch above 5 feet, 2.3 into number of inches above that. So for 5 feet 10 inches person will get 73 kgs ideal body weight. So you have to calculate that and start them in volume control, and initially start with 6 ml of ideal per kg of ideal body weight or predicted body weight only, and measure plateaus, P plateaus every 5 seconds, every 4 hours, and every time you increase the trial volumes, always measure P plateaus, and you have to check it by holding inspiratory hold, and that has to press only maximum to 1 second, not more than that. Okay. And P plateaus, if there are more than 30, reduce the tidal volume by 1 ml per kg and check P plateau again after 10 minutes. Still, if on the higher side, reduce to 4 ml per kg body weight also. Always make sure P plateaus on the lower side, you can accept permissive hypercapnia also here. But if acidosis goes less than 7.2, then you have to increase the respiratory rate so that pH goes more than 7.2. If still it is less than 7.2, then you have to add bicarb infusion also. If still it is less than 1.5, then you have to increase you can accept P plateaus more than 30 also by increasing the tidal volume slightly. Okay. And respiratory rate always 30, around 25 to 30, and PEEPs also high PEEP to 14, 16. Depends on your high PEEP and FiO2 graph. You can titrate that, and always make sure you give fast track to the patient every day. Jadu ka chapi, check all the things, feeding, analgesia and sedation, all those things you have to make sure. As soon as you intubate the patient, you have to extubate that patient also. Every patient should get a daily check of fast hug BID. Okay. With this, I will end my topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Anand sir and Dr. Zakir Hussain sir, for the excellent presentation you have done today. This has been a truly enlightening session. Next, we'll begin with question and answers. But before that, I want to thank both of you for enlightening all of us today with this beautiful presentation. I did not know that pruning can have so many more effects on the patients, especially the hemodynamic factors. Again, Dr. Zakir Hussain sir, your presentation was simply awesome, and definitely I think it is one of the best shows I have ever seen on mechanical ventilation strategies in ARDS. Now, I think it's right time to begin. You start firing your questions, we start answering you back. Thank you. So, in the patients of proning, my first question will be to Dr. Anand sir. Sir, in proning patients, so what should be the step-by-step guide to a beginner like everybody who is beginning to start proning in their ICUs? What should be the step-by-step guide? Please elaborate.
That is very good and practical question which you have asked. If we talk about the step-by-step, there is a protocol. There is certain protocols which we should follow in the ICUs when we put the patient in a proning position. So we must first apply the inclusion and exclusion criteria on that. Along with that, we should stick on the ABG parameters. That is very, very essential. Initially, we should not put the patient on the proning position until unless we ensure that the condition gets worse within 48 hours. So if the PaO2, FiO2 is less than 150 and it remains the same or it gets worse within 48 hours, then we think about that we should put the patient in a proning position. Otherwise, the trials and the studies which shows there is no benefit at all. If inclusion criteria will be satisfied, then we put the patient in the proning position. We think that the PS should be taken up, withdrawn, before we put the patient in proning position. And we ensure that all the vitals and the parameters should be maintained. If there is any worsening in the hemodynamics, there is any SpO2 that get decreased, we should immediately change the position from proning to supine. Or if we see the vitals are stable, then we can continue it for the next 1 hour. And we should take ABG. If it is improved more than 10 centimeter, 10 mm of Hg PO2 get improved in that ABG, we should continue it for next 5 to 6 hours. After that, again we can take ABG. That is the standard protocol. If it is okay, there is no hemodynamic instability and PO2 is gradually increasing with that posture, we should continue it for next 16 to 17 hours, and then again review the patient. So this is the procedure we should follow. After that, we can put again in a same supine position. In meantime, if any worsening will take place, we should follow the same guidelines of the protocol. We should put the patient again in the supine position. If the things going on in a smooth way, there is no need to change the position till 16 to 17 hours. So that will be the strategy we should follow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice explanation. The next question is from Dr. Ravindra Shinde, sir, and he has a very interesting question. Is if a patient is maintaining saturation and is maintaining on moderate to severe ARDS condition on a NIV, so should we continue that NIV? What's your opinion, Dr. Zakir?
Yeah, very good question. The problem is if in severe ARDS there is a high mortality if you continue on NIV. Only thing is 24 hours there should be one intensivist backup should be there, so that in case any deterioration, any slight deterioration in his conscious level, or any worsening in his respiratory fatigue, or any worsening in hemodynamics, so you have to take a call immediately and you have to intubate, or else the mortality will be very high. In severe ARDS, usually we never take a chance in continuing NIV. Whereas in up to till moderate ARDS, we can still give a try of NIV. Whereas in severe ARDS, you have to be very cautious because they won't tolerate NIV that much compared to moderate and mild ARDS. And second thing, there are some studies which have shown that extrapulmonary ARDS people, they tolerate NIV compared to pulmonary causes of ARDS, like pneumonias and those things. So you have to be very careful. What is the cause for ARDS? Depends on the thing, you may take a decision. In immunocompromised people, probably you can give a try even in severe ARDS also, provided there is some backup always. So you have to have low threshold for intubation.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very excellent explanation. Next question is to Dr. Anand Agrawal, sir. So, sir, my question is, proning we are doing for patients with moderate to severe ARDS or severe ARDS. So, in severe ARDS patients, there is always a chance of requirement of a CPR. So, how do you think that we would be giving CPR in a prone patient, or what should be the steps if the requirement has come for a CPR? What should be done?
Yeah, you're right. You're correct. Actually, the patient get worse, or there is a cardiac arrest, or somehow we need required our CPR in that position. So we don't have enough time to change the position from prone to supine, and we need 6 to 7 members also, and it takes around 10 to 10 minutes at least minimum. So we don't have enough time to change the positions. So generally, we should follow the same protocol, and we use the CPR technique in a pronate conditions. Although the guidelines are different, vary from normal supine position CPR to the prone position CPR. We just use that same position. We just straight the bed, and we compress over at the level of thoracic T7 level, and we just make the landmark, and we just start give the CPR. The one thing which we must keep in our mind, that we should put some cushion or water bottle below the sternum, so that pressure can be generated, pressure can be dissipated to the heart, and the same results you may get. The study says there is no difference in that supine CPR and in pronate CPR if it will be done properly.
That is actually a very wonderful explanation. I never thought that this can happen this way. So my next question will be to Dr. Zakir Hussain, sir. Sir, Dr. Paresh Mohanta has asked a very interesting question about introduction of steroids in which phase of ARDS should the introduction of steroids be done, and should we start immediately after ventilation? Should steroids be started immediately after ventilation? Then I'll have a part 2 after you have answered this question.
Okay. Very interesting question, but very controversial question actually. The problem is the steroids are always controversial. The problem is steroids is you have to use early in accelerative phase only. The moment you cross 10 days of the ARDS, there is no role of steroids initially. And second thing, there are so many complications with the steroids also. If you give neuromuscular blockades and steroids, there are high chances of having critical illness, neuropathies, and difficulty in weaning, and all those issues will be there. And second, the mortality, there is no significant mortality benefit except for Meduri trial that they have done long back, but the recent trials doesn't show any benefit of adding steroids. We have to be very careful, especially the cause of ARDS. If there is a bacterial pneumonia, then you can give a try of steroids. But whereas in viral pneumonia, previously like corona, SARS and MERS, they have shown high mortality by using steroids in viral pneumonias. Whereas nowadays in this corona, MERS2, COVID this season, we are giving steroids for almost all corona COVID cases, COVID-19 cases. Whereas previously in viral pneumonias, you have to be very careful in giving steroids. And third thing is steroids dose regarding methylprednisolone, we go with 1 to 1.5 mg per kg body weight per day. not more than that. So ideally we give 60 to 80 mg per day methylprednisolone, but we have to continue for 14 to 16 days, and there will be complications with the steroids also. The high chance of having VAPs and other complications like uncontrolled sugars, and all those things will increase the morbidity of the patient. So if you want to give a steroids, give it early. As soon as the patient comes to you, even in NIV also, you have to try a steroids. Not after intubation, even on NIV also, give a trial of steroids if there is an indication. Or else try to.
Sir, one more ancillary to the question from my side is, how do we taper steroids? How do we taper steroids?
Yeah, up to 7 days there is no need of tapering steroids. But if you continuing steroids after till 10 days, probably you have to taper it gradually over 3 days. But you have to be very careful in using steroids because a lot of complications are there. So depends if you are comfortable in using steroids, but the guidelines doesn't suggest using steroids in many cases of ARDS.
So
use only for 5 days. In our ICUs, we go with only 7 days of steroids and we abruptly stop steroids. Not more than that. That's true only in bacterial pneumonias in certain scenarios. Even in H1N1 also, we are not at all using steroids for the patients.
Okay. So, sir, to all the audience, if you have seen the presentation of Zakir sir, he had, mysteriously not mentioned steroids in the presentation, and
Yeah.
this is the point that is very important. That in the current COVID era, ICMR has endorsed dexamethasone. That dexamethasone can be
8
given.
mg.
So, my next question will be to Dr. Zakir Hussain again. About we should talk controversial points so that we have clarity over the topic. So next my question should be, so what should be done, which is better, can we comment on dexamethasone or methylprednisolone, and again the dosage that should be given for both of them if we are to give steroids?
Okay. In COVID ARDS, probably the dexamethasone they have, as per the study, they have given 8 mg dexamethasone per day for almost 7 days. They have given that. Whereas in normal ARDS with the bacterial pneumonias and other pneumonias, the dose of steroid is 1 mg per kg of methylprednisolone. They have given in some studies up to 20 mg of dexamethasone. Actually, dexamethasone is more potent glucocorticoid and less mineralocorticoid, so less side effects. Whereas methylprednisolone is lesser potent than dexamethasone compared to potency of the glucocorticoid. So dexamethasone is always preferable. It depends on the setup.
Yeah, this is again, Dr. Zakir has safely sailed the boat here. I would like to congratulate him on this. One more question to Dr. Anand sir. Sir, Anand sir, we can't ignore what we are going through right now, the COVID era. The ProSiva trial, it takes emphasis because it is a trial in which actively H1N1 patients were taken. Around almost 40 to 50% population of ProSiva trial were H1N1 patients who were having ARDS. So ProSiva becomes a landmark study. So why don't we go through the salient points of ProSiva trial again?
Yeah, you're correct. Somehow you're correct, because if we talk about the H1N1, so we can use it, no doubt. The ProSiva trial says the proning conditions and in ARDS is very, very useful. But if we talk about the H1N1, there is a vaccine which has been given to the healthcare providers. But here the problem is different. So we don't have any vaccine in hand. So our healthcare staff is also much more at a risk to get this infection, and if we expose them maximally. But definitely the proning conditions might save the life. Although in COVID conditions, if we talk about the prone, so we need to change the position every 2 hours. We need some assistance over here, as well as if the patient's condition get deteriorated or secretions may come out. So it need a more care than the supine position. So in that scenario, we can use it. In the COVID condition, we can use it the prone condition, but we need some expert staff at the center. That is the prerequisite for this strategy.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. So my next question will be to Dr. Zakir Hussain again. We know that there is the continuously part of every anesthesia book or every critical care book is that weaning begins as soon as intubation. But when exactly do we wean an ARDS patient, and what should be first tapered? Whether PEEP should be tapered or whether FiO2 should be tapered, and when should, how frequently should it be tapered? These are some points which the audience would like to know.
Sure. Very good question. The moment you intubate the patient, the next day you have to think about extubating this patient. So you have to think about weaning the patient. The first criteria for weaning is, first, the primary problem for which patient was intubated should resolve by 60 to 75% at least. Then only you have to think about weaning. And second thing, the patient should not be on any hemodynamic supports. So there should not be any vasopressors. If vasopressors are there, at least the dose of the vasopressor should reduce to 75% or less. And third criteria, there should be no electrolyte imbalance, and all those things should be corrected initially. Then you have to think about weaning in general. Whereas in ARDS, you have to see the PF ratio, PO2 by FiO2 ratio. If the PF ratio is more than 200, then you have to think about weaning. In weaning, first what we do in our setup and as per the protocol is, first we reduce the FiO2 for every third day, second day. First we come down on FiO2, then only we will reduce the PEEPs. Otherwise we will de-recruit the patients. So to prevent those things, we go gradually on PEEP. Whereas FiO2 we come down slow every day, whereas PEEP is the last thing we reduce. Then fourth thing is, in the weaning, you have to be very careful. You should be having backup non-invasive ventilation, same like COPD patients also when you extubate COPD patients. So there should be always backup plan. If in case patient deteriorated, you should have NIV or HFNC. Even nowadays we are using HFNC, high flow nasal cannula also for weaning the patients. So they show good results with that. So in weaning, always make sure the X-ray there should be at least 70% resolution, and a clinical improvement should be there, and there should not be any neuromuscular weakness also. You should do ultrasound chest also to see the diaphragm movements and all those things. If everything is fine, then only think about weaning ARDS patient. Ideally, weaning of ARDS patient starts after 7 days only, not earlier than that. Usually after 5 to 7 days only you think about weaning. Usually they won't respond that faster. So ideally after 7 days with the sedation, paralytic agents and steroids, probably they will have a lot of comorbidities. So you have to think about multi reasons before. You have to examine all factors. Then only you have to think about weaning the patients.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Sunil Grover, sir. And he has questions to Dr. Anand Agrawal, sir, about what extra precautions should we take in a COVID ARDS, which different from how is it different from a non-COVID ARDS? Extra precautions and difference in a COVID ARDS from a non-COVID ARDS.
Yeah, actually COVID is very contagious, and we don't have weapons to protect us, especially the healthcare providers. There is no vaccines, and we are taking only prophylaxis, which is a CQ, that is debatable also. And there are different views with this prophylaxis. So if we go inside the ICU and we are doing procedures which are maneuvers which are related with the proning positions, and when we put the patient in the proning conditions, there are secretions and aerosol which has been generated. So we must be careful in that regard. If the aerosols get generated, we should put on our mask, or we should put on our PPE coverall, as well as we should use the face shield to protect us. That is a good idea. As well as we should avoid close approximation with the patients. We do with the precautions, and this is the only way to protect us. Otherwise, if we want to save the patients, we need to come near to them, and we are all protected by the grace of the God, and nothing else. We should keep in this fight.
Excellent answer. And simultaneously, a counter question from my side is: so proning in COVID patient, will it be feasible as of today?
Yes, it is feasible. The same in the COVID patients. The only thing is the apprehension of the healthcare providers. If the apprehension is not there, then we can do it. We can follow the entire protocol as we do in other patients of the ARDS, like bacterial and other causes. So there is no difference in that. Only thing which is the apprehension to get the infection. So we should take the extra precautions for the same. If we are using the PPE and personal protective equipment, then there is no harm, and we can ensure to our team members so that they will do it in a justifiable manner or with a full-hearted. That is the only way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the excellent answer. The next question is from Dr. Ravindra Shinde. Does every COVID ARDS is because of cytokine storm? Dr. Zakir?
Not exactly because of cytokine storm. Cytokine storm will lead to further worsening of clinical condition, but it's not because of cytokine storm alone. Because of this worsening of pneumonia, COVID pneumonia is the first reason for ARDS. Then only comes the cytokine storm. Cytokine storm can happen even 8th day, or 10th day, or 14th day also. So that is completely different. Cytokine storm, the clinical condition will worsen, the fever, breathlessness, and the myalgias, all those things restart again with the cytokine storm. But it doesn't mean that the patient is landing in ARDS. Not every cytokine storm patient will land in ARDS, whereas every pneumonias will definitely land in ARDS.
Wonderful. So my next question will be to Dr. Anand Agarwal, sir. It's from Dr. Saurabh Mandliwar, sir. He has a question. Is even if we don't need to add steroids to everything, that what Zakir Hussain sir said, that it's a personal choice. So his question is, can we add steroids to bacterial pneumonias also with high counts? Is it feasible to add steroids in bacterial pneumonias, or should we avoid steroids in these cases?
Question is from me.
No, yes sir.
Yeah. If we talk about the steroid, so it is always controversial as discussed with Dr. Zakir. So if we talk about the viral pneumonias, especially if we talk about the COVID, so we use the steroids only because of the condition of cytokine storms. So once the patient get infected with the viral pneumonias, so there is a one stage which come when the viral pneumonia left behind and there is a cytokine storm which appeared due to initiation of the inflammatory cascade. So this inflammatory cascade is a killer. So to reduce this inflammatory cascade, so we utilize this steroids to reduce this inflammation. That is actually the risk-benefit ratio which is high, in particularly in COVID induced ARDS. But if we talk about the bacterial ARDS, the role of steroid is very, very controversial, and we should not use at all, especially if we are using it only to reduce the fibrosis which may occur later in the life, that may lead to ILD. But generally I have seen the cases if there is a septicemia or the conditions, the steroid should be used judiciously, because it is very, very harmful and it may even worse the condition.
Wonderful. Wonderful explanation, sir. Next question will be to Dr. Zakir Hussain, sir. Sir, as you know, sir, there are centers in India which, where ABG facility takes time because it requires a specialist to do ABG. So, what do we do when a breathless patient who is having bilateral Krebs comes to an emergency room to us? So there's something called SpO2 by FiO2 ratio. Yeah. Would you throw some light on it?
Yeah, sure. Very good question. In especially resource limited centers like peripheries, they don't have ABG facilities, and in emergency, if they don't have that ABG machine there in the emergency, if you want to know the status of his PF ratio, there is some another SF ratio, saturation by FiO2 ratio. So ideally that it should be more than 450. Whereas in that is corresponds to PF ratio also, PO2 by FiO2. If PO2 FiO2 is 300, that means this is around 315. Whereas if 200 to 300 means the SF ratio, saturation by FiO2 ratio should be around 235 to 315. In between that correspond to PaO2 by FiO2 ratio of 200 to 300, which is suggestive of mild ARDS. If less than 235 means there is a moderate ARDS kind of thing. If SaO2 by or SpO2 by FiO2 ratio less than 235, it corresponds to less than 200 of PaO2 by FiO2 ratio. That was proven in some studies. So in casualty, in emergency, you can still use these parameters also, SaO2 by FiO2, but the accuracy is still doubt, because the ARDS by definition they have given PaO2 by FiO2 ratio with PEEP, they have given that, not without PEEP. So previous in the old definition they have given without PEEP, but now the definition they have changed and they mentioned there should be some amount of PEEP to define it as to be mild, moderate, severe ARDS, with at least equal to at least 5 of the PEEP should be there to define it as a ARDS. So in room air or on face mask, you can't calculate this PEEP ratio because you won't give the PEEP there. So ideally, the efficacy of SpO2 by FiO2 is still controversial kind of thing, but we can use it in emergency when there are no resources of ABG.
Yeah, definitely, a wonderful explanation for a resource limited situation. What can a person do when you don't have an ABG by the corner, or it is available? It will be available after an hour or two. You have to immediately take the decision to prevent deterioration of the patient, whether the patient is to be intubated or whether the patient has to be put on BiPAP. So BiPAP or NIV for that matter.
Yes.
So my next question will be to Dr. Anand Agarwal, sir. So sir, how frequent clearance should be done in a prone patient, sir? How frequent?
Generally, if we talk about in the ARDS patients, we should do the clearance in tube clearance within an hour. But in case if secretions is copious and it fills the tube in a prone condition, especially if the patient in a proning condition, so the repeated secretion which has been drained out due to the gravity impact, so many a times it need more frequently than in the supine position. But it is beneficial because once the secretions get cleared, the chances of ventilator associated pneumonia get also reduced. So we can frequently do it, and it is a good sign and it is beneficial also.
So I am so motivated by Dr. Agarwal, Dr. Anand's talk is so that I feel like every ARDS patient should be prone for 17 hours at least every single day. So my next question will be, sir, a person who is motivated by your talk and feels like he should prone every ARDS patient, mild, moderate, severe. So where should he stop? What should be the exclusion criteria, and when not to prone the patients? That is also very important.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very important also. So we must know this is a very crucial thing when we should not do this thing. So there are certain absolute contraindications and a few relative contraindications. But generally, if we talk about the absolute, so there are two things in which we should not put the patient in a proning condition. The one is increased intracranial tension, and another is the vertebral fracture. If it is unstable, then we should not put the patient in a proning condition. There are a few relative contraindications, like if the patient's undergone a recent cardiac surgeries, having the arrhythmia, having pregnancy, or intra-abdominal pressure get increased due to ascites. So in that condition, we should not use it. Even in a morbid obesity, like if the weight is more than 135 or 40, so that will be difficult to prone to supine. So maneuver is very difficult in such cases. So we should avoid the proning procedures. So in rest of the condition, we can do it with the relative things. So in most of the cases we can use it, but in few cases we should take precautions.
Wonderful answers, a wonderful explanation. Next question to Dr. Zakir Hussain is, sir, you are working in a high-end tertiary care center in Hyderabad, in a ICU care. So sir, we have in all the ICU cases, I'm not talking about you, but we most of us see ICU patients in our setup. So the role of cocktail of antibiotics, antifungals, antiviral in ARDS patients. So what should be, should every patient be given a cocktail of these, or do they actually benefit a patient?
Yeah, it's very commonly done in most of the setups. Even if you won't start, also the primary consultant will start by default all the antibiotics, antiviral and antifungal. They won't listen to that. The problem is initially whenever the patient comes, first you should know the cause of ARDS. If you have in your center, if you have the biofire, which we can get all the bugs, whether it's a bacterial or viral or whatever, fungal. So first start with the biofire. If that suggests of a bacterial pneumonias, but you can start with a broad spectrum antibiotic initially with BLBLIs. Plus, you can add antivirals if you're suspecting any viral pneumonias only. Suppose if H1N1 positive, then you have to think about starting oseltamivir and all those things. Whereas in COVID, we are not starting any oseltamivir to any patient unless until proven is a H1N1 pneumonia. And third thing, regarding antifungal, early start of antifungal, there is no role. Very rarely we see fungal pneumonias causing ARDS, and just in immunocompromised patients only, or patient on chemotherapy, or rare cases we see fungal pneumonias causing ARDS. So starting initial stage of ARDS antifungal is not justified. When the patient after 10 days of ICU stay and prolonged steroids, then you are on TPN and all those things. If you are suspecting fungal, then probably there is role of starting antifungal. If there is a there is a hemodynamic instability, then you have to restart immediately. The drug of choice will be echinocandins, not azoles. And if you are having that galactomannan test, then you have to think about starting voriconazole and all those things. But unless until proven, then only start. Unnecessary drugs will cause lot of side effects, lot of drug interactions also, which will affect the patient.
Okay, wonderful explanation.
For every patient, try to have the fast track BID. For every patient who comes to your ICU, every day you have to check, at least ask your nurses to take the fast track BID. Fast track with feeding, analgesia, sedation, and
I think we have lost Dr. Zakir Hussain's communication. I would proceed with Dr. Anand Agarwal. Dr. Saurabh Mandliwar has asked an interesting question about post ARDS fibrosis. Should we use pirfenidone?
Yeah. If there is fibrosis which occur, there is no role of pirfenidone. Once the fibrosis get developed, it will not revert it. It will work in the phasic manner. In the process of fibrosis, it can stop it. But if it will be given after the fibrosis, it will not work. So in that scenario, if we give the pirfenidone, I don't think it will be beneficial. Rather, if we give the steroid initially, if especially in cases of COVID, we can reduce the fibrosis. Otherwise, there is no study which shows gives the idea about the pirfenidone which is used in ARDS induced ILDs.
So I'll take a leaf from from the timeline of events that is happening. Is that things keep evolving. To the audience, this is my message, that things keep evolving, and things keep evolving to the point that in 2012 to 2011, when ILD was still in its baby steps, a lot of research has happened in ILD. So in 2012 to 2013-14, that time every ILD was IPF. At that time, every ILD was IPF, and every patient was started. Then there's study done in India, the trial done where it was proven that Indian patients, they have this hypersensitivity pneumonitis as a primary cause of ILD and not IPF. Suddenly, our thought process changed. Initially, it was told that IPF, that pirfenidone can be used only in IPF. Last year, a European study, which is last time in January I saw it, it was about to be published. It showed that pirfenidone and nintedanib actually benefited much more in CTD ILD and HP ILD than IPF patients. So we don't know as of today what Sir Anand sir has said, that is totally true, and research keeps on happening, and things may change after some time, and we'll have a definite idea about some questions. Definitely some answers and questions will definitely be controversial, but yes, you have to keep reading. That's what is the case.
Yeah, few more studies are needed to consolidate the idea.
Definitely. So next question is
again to Dr. Agarwal, sir, is there any benefit of left or right lateral positioning while using NIV?
If you are using the NIV, then benefit of the positioning, if we put it in a prone position, then it will be always beneficial. The left and right position, I don't think it have any added advantage, because patient many a times feel cumbersome when he is in a either in a right lateral or left lateral position, and it may displace also. So there are exhalation port which has been associated with the interface. If we give the NIV to the patients, so it may also compressed, or it may also been covered when the patients change his position from supine to right lateral or left lateral. So many a times it's my experience that if the patients goes in a supine in a right lateral or left lateral positions, it may displace, or it may be the exhalation port may be covered by the bed sheets or by the pillow, so that exhalation process get deferred. So it may increase the CO2 level overnight if the patient change the position. So I don't think it is very beneficial.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful explanation. So next question is to recently joined and rejoined Dr. Zakir Hussain, sir. What is the role of CRP and procalcitonin levels in monitoring and tapering of antibiotics and antivirals in ARDS patients?
Antivirals or antibiotics?
Both of them.
Okay. So procalcitonin consists of only antibacterial. Procalcitonin we are using nowadays only to de-escalate antibiotics than to start antibiotics.
Okay. And
Okay. Previously used to, pardon?
Monitoring?
To de-escalate antibiotics than to restart antibiotics. Okay. That is only meant for that only. For bacterial pneumonias, if that is high, the suggests of bacteria. If it is lower side, then it suggests of virus. That everybody knows that. Only thing, serial monitoring of procalcitonin only beneficial if you want to de-escalate antibiotics from broad spectrum to narrow spectrum. Only there the role of procal work. Whereas CRP is acute phase reactant, it can be high in many conditions. Any viral or bacterial, all those conditions, the CRP will be high. That is a acute phase reactant that will definitely go high.
Sir, Anand sir, one more question about the role of N-acetylcysteine in COVID or in ARDS.
N-acetylcysteine have dual impact actually. The one is antioxidant, another is mucolytic. So if we talk about the N-acetylcysteine in cases of ARDS, its impact in the airway is negligible because there is no mucus impaction. If we talk about the ARDS, there is the alveoli which get filled. So use of N-acetylcysteine either in the form of oral tablet or in the form of nebulization, I don't think it has any use, because N-acetylcysteine always used in cases of either in the bronchiectasis or in cases of COPD where impaction is maximal. So to improve the ventilation, we can use the N-acetylcysteine, but in case of ARDS, I don't think it have any role. So we should not use N-acetylcysteine as adjuvant therapy in cases of ARDS.
So, sir, how frequent, Anand sir, how frequent an ABG should be done in ARDS patient?
It depends.
Because in a private setup, ABG costs anything between 1,000 to 1,500 rupees. So a burden of expenditure is put on a patient, and except for metro cities, a lot of Indian population is not insured, not medically insured. So that question becomes very relevant in small towns.
Yeah, your concern is valid because our population, like 70% of our population comes under the category of poverty, below the poverty line. So many a times it is difficult to bear that cost if we go for ABG frequently. But we should follow the protocols. That protocols related with the NIV and mechanical ventilator, invasive ventilator. If the patient was put on the non-invasive ventilators, we should repeat the ABG after 6 hours. If there is no worsening at all, then we should continue it and do it 12 hourly. if the patient put on a mechanical ventilator, especially if we talk about the ARDS, then there is a certain protocol which should be followed. If we put in prone position, initially if we take the ABG, that after 1 hour of proning conditions, proning position, and after 6 hours we should do it, we should take it, and if it is normal or it is optimal, then we can repeat it after 16 to 17 hours, and after that if the patient again put on the supine position, we should repeat it after 10 hours, or then we put again in a prone position. So we should follow the protocol, that is a mandatory. Despite of it is costly, that is a constant, no doubt, but we should follow the protocol and we should stick it for the safety of the patients. Yeah.
Definitely. So this is going as a tremendous situation, but I'm getting the nudge from the organizers that we have to close down things. So my second last question will be to Dr. Zakir Hussain, sir. And a very relevant question, sir, something of a nightmare which haunts every intensivist is how to prevent VAP in ARDS patients.
Yeah, very excellent question. The incidence of VAP is very high in all the bigger centers. Wherever you go, the incidence of VAP is high. That's too with multi-drug resistant bacteria only. The prevention of VAP starts before intubation only. Within 5 minutes before intubation, try to aspirate the gastric contents from the Ryle tube so that there won't be any aspirations during the ambu bag. And second thing, as soon as you intubate, always intubate with the subglottic suction ET tube. There are some studies which are shown subglottic suction ET tubes have helped in preventing VAP. And third thing, daily head and elevation should be there, and daily chlorhexidine mouthwash, that is also beneficial. There's a VAP prevention bundles out there. You have to strictly follow those things. And fifth thing is daily sedation vacation, and you have to think about weaning the patient. Daily you have to assess the conscious levels, and you have to think about weaning. And DVT prophylaxis is must for all the patient, and strictly 1:1 nursing for any ventilator patient. She should not go and help other patients, and also you should follow strict 5 steps of hand wash before touching patient, after touching patient, and all those things are must for the patient. Before touching, after touching the patient's surroundings, and all those things. Strict hygiene should be followed, and avoid H1 PPIs, unnecessary use of PPIs. Almost every patient in the ICU gets the PPI that will increase the gastric pH and will worsen the HAP and also VAP ratios. So try to prevent unnecessarily. Only if there is a indication, then only give PPIs or H1 blockers or antacids like sucralfate syrup or all those things. If you follow all these measures, then definitely there is a less incidence of VAP.
So, sir, this has been really eye-opening that you are suggesting that we should not add PPI or H2 antagonist to every patient.
Yeah, because that will increase the gastric pH. From last 10 years, there are so many studies that suggest of increasing VAP and HAP, both incidence, by using PPAs or H1 blockers, because it will increase the gastric pH and it will cause growth of microbacteria there. That will increase the incidence of VAP. So you have to use only judiciously PPS in the ICU. Only if the patient is having high risk of having stress ulcers, then only use PPS or H2 blocker, or among all three, antacid syrups are safer. Sucralfate is more safer compared to H1 blocker compared to PPS.
So, sir, last question of the day again to Dr. Zakir Hussain. Sir, is the fluid management different in COVID ARDS than a non-COVID ARDS, and what exactly is the term fluid management meant in ARDS?
Fluid management means daily, depends on the clinical condition. Either you feed him through enteral feeds, or if you are giving IV fluids, you have to be very careful in cumulative fluid balance in day 4 or day 5. That is very important. The lot of studies like FACTRIAL and all those things, they have seen cumulative balance. So daily input-output chart you have to calculate for 5 days, and you have to check the cumulative balance. If there is a significant positive balance at the end of 5th day, then the weaning will be difficult for the patient from the ventilator. So you have to be very careful in giving the fluids to the patient. Conservative fluid management is always beneficial in ARDS or all the patient who is on ventilator. So they have shown good weaning, and also mortality benefit also there, because that will increase extravascular lung water, that will worsen bleeding to the patient. And in COVID ARDS, depends. Make sure you should not. Won't be much dehydration to the patient. If they are spiking high grade fever, probably you have to give fluids to the patient, definitely. Or else you will end into dehydration and unnecessary acute kidney injury will happen for the patient. So you have to be titrate each patient individually, and depends on the clinical condition, depends on the patient. You have to take a decision on that. If he is spiking high grade fever, then you have to hydrate him properly. The urine color will show you whether the patient is dehydrated or not. The monitoring of the CVP lines doesn't have any role in patients with ARDS with especially high peaks. The CVP won't be correct in patients with high peaks. That won't show proper value. So clinically, you see with ultrasound abdomen also, you can see IVC, whether this collapsing or distending, depends on the clinical condition. You hydrate the patient. If there is a significant shock, hydrate. Or else, don't hydrate him unnecessarily. That will go, and the cumulative balance is very dangerous than the fluids. The cumulative balance at the end of 5th day, that matters most in ARDS.
At the outset, I'd really like to thank both the speakers of the day, Professor Anand Agrawal sir and Zakir Hussain sir, for putting together this huge effort for this presentation of webinar on ARDS. You know, they made a tough job look simple, but again, this wouldn't have been possible without the effort of Chest Council of India, Dr. Narayan Pradeep sir and NS Krishna sir, Atri Gangopadhyay sir, Vijay Kumar sir, both the office bearers, Dr. Ravi Doshi sir, Dr. Narendra Methuku sir. Yes, without you, this wouldn't have been possible. Again, I would like to thank the team of CIPLA for putting some faith in all three of us for putting this show together. And there are some boys in the background. Yes, they always work hard to put this show flawlessly for all of you. That is the Blueberry Events. At the end, it is for you, my audience. Everything is for you. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you so much.